The sound of a siren in the distance cut through the quiet of early morning Savannah. Claire Bennett stood motionless in the doorway of her tiny kitchen, still in her bathrobe, staring at the envelope lying on the counter. The toast in her hand had gone cold. She hadn't even taken a bite. Her heart was thudding too loud. Moments earlier, she had opened the mailbox like she always did after dropping the trash. Bills, catalogs, and then it caught her eye. Ivory envelope, thick as cardstock with gold-embossed calligraphy. She'd known. Before even reading the names, she'd known. Now the words shimmered under the fluorescent light. Mark Bennett and Tessa Langford request the honor of your presence. Claire blinked slowly, not from surprise, but from the sharp twist of something deeper. Humiliation. Why now? Why this? Why her? The kettle clicked off in the background. A cloud of steam rose, but Claire didn't move. She had imagined many things about Mark since he walked out 2 years ago. His new life, his excuses, the silence he left behind, but she never imagined this. Behind the closed door of the hallway, she could hear her 8-year-old son, Noah, humming the theme to one of his cartoons, feet kicking against the mattress, a sound that always brought her calm, but not today. "Noah, time to get up," Claire called out, trying to keep her voice from shaking. "It's already 7:30. You'll be late." "5 more minutes," he groaned. She forced herself to move, forced the smile, forced the rhythm. Toast on a plate, a glass of orange juice, and a folded napkin. It was always the small acts that held her together. Noah stumbled in, still in pajamas, hair sticking up, rubbing his eyes. Claire smiled automatically. His features so much like Mark's. The same curve of the lips, the same serious eyes when he focused. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, ruffling his hair. "Morning, Mom," he mumbled, sliding onto the kitchen chair. "You have your math test today, remember?" He shrugged. "I guess." "No guessing. You'll do great. We studied last night, and you're smarter than you think." He nodded faintly and took a bite of toast. Claire sat across from him, trying not to let her eyes drift to the envelope beside the sink. She had hidden it beneath a grocery list, but it might as well have been written across the ceiling. Mark. Tessa. Wedding. 2 years ago, Claire had still believed they might fix things. She had begged him to go to counseling, begged him to think of Noah. But Mark had chosen something, someone new. Tessa, the pretty, young interior designer who smiled too much and never blinked when she lied. The divorce came like a storm, fast, cold, indifferent. Mark fought for joint custody, then barely used it. He missed birthdays. He forgot Noah's school play. He was late with child support more often than not. Claire had never told Noah how much she cried after each broken promise. She just smiled and said, "Dad's busy, honey." Claire stood and picked up their empty plates. She washed them slowly, as if the soap and water could cleanse more than just crumbs. "Mom," Noah said suddenly, "do you think Dad will come to my baseball game this Saturday?" Claire's hands paused in the sink. "I don't know, sweetie. Maybe. Why don't we hope so?" He nodded. She didn't have the heart to tell him not to. As they packed up and left the apartment, the envelope stayed behind on the counter. But its weight followed her all the way to the car. The fluorescent lights in the office buzzed faintly overhead, casting a dull sheen across the laminate desk where Claire sat, half-finished sandwich in one hand, the other scrolling through client emails. Her inbox was cluttered, but her mind wasn't there. Not really. She hadn't touched the invitation since morning, but its presence still pulsed through her bag like a siren. Across the office, the hum of printers, whispered phone calls, and clicking keyboards carried on as usual. Debbie Monroe, her closest coworker and one of the few people Claire genuinely liked, peeked over the cubicle wall with a smile. "Hey, Claire, got anything exciting for lunch?" Claire held up the sad sandwich. "Turkey and mustard." Again, Debbie laughed. "Living on the edge, huh?" Claire forced a grin. "It's the accountant lifestyle." Debbie tilted her head. "You okay?" "You look tight," Claire hesitated, then shrugged. Did some cleaning. Noah's got a test. Nothing major. She didn't want to talk about it. Not yet. Not when it was still so raw, so unreal. A few moments later, the front desk line rang on her direct extension. "Claire," came the receptionist's voice, "there's mail for you at the front. It looks fancy." Claire's heart dropped. Fancy. She stood slowly, walked through the maze of cubicles, and turned the corner to the reception desk. There it was, lying flat like it belonged there, cream-colored, still sealed. She could almost smell the expensive paper. The receptionist smiled awkwardly. "Someone must think highly of you." Claire nodded mutely, took the envelope, and returned to her desk. She closed the door of the small private office she shared, sat down, and ran her fingers along the golden trim. A ridiculous part of her hoped it was something else, but no. She opened it. The card inside was thick, weighty, and unreasonably elegant, lettered in perfect cursive. "Mark Bennett and Tessa Langford joyfully invite you and your son, Noah Bennett, to celebrate their wedding at the Astoria Grand Hotel, downtown Atlanta, Saturday at 11 a.m. Claire read it 3 times. Each word was a slap in the face. She had been many things in the last 2 years. Devastated, numb, tired, resilient, but this was new. This was humiliation tied up with a bow and sent to her place of work. She stared at her own name next to her son's, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if this weren't the woman Mark had left her for. As if Claire should smile, show up, sit in the back, and clap while they said "I do." She pressed the invitation against her chest and closed her eyes. Her pulse throbbed in her ears. She should tear it in half, toss it in the bin, light a match. But then she thought of Noah, his questions, his hope, the way he still looked out the window when Mark promised to come. That night, after dinner, she sat Noah down at the kitchen table. He was coloring, humming to himself, the innocence of his world still perfectly intact. "Noah," she said softly, "I got something in the mail today. It's about your dad." He looked up quickly, pencil pausing in midair. "Is he okay?" "Yes, he's fine. He's getting married. To Miss Tessa." Noah blinked. "Oh, really?" "Yes," she said, watching his face carefully. "And he invited us to the wedding." His mouth formed a small "oh." Then, slowly, a smile spread. "Can we go?" Claire's heart clenched. "Do you want to?" "Well, he's still my dad." "Right." She nodded, swallowing the stone in her throat. "I think I want to go," he said. "It's an important day for him." Claire looked at her son, this little boy with a heart too big for the world, and knew the answer had already been made. "Okay," she said gently. "We'll go. For you." Noah grinned. "Thanks, Mom." She smiled back, but inside something cracked. Not because she couldn't handle it, but because she could, and that somehow made it worse. The Saturday morning sun filtered lazily through the blinds of Claire's kitchen as she glanced again at the clock on the wall. 9:58 a.m. He said he'd be here at 10. Claire poured another cup of coffee, not because she wanted it, but because it gave her hand something to do. Mark hadn't shown up for his visitation days in months. Not since the court had stopped sending reminders. She didn't expect much from him anymore. And yet today she was nervous. Noah was already dressed, pacing around the living room with his little backpack, filled with snacks, his tablet, and the baseball glove Mark bought him on a rare whim last year. His face was lit up in a way Claire hadn't seen in a long time. Then, outside, the low purr of a car engine. A sleek black Audi pulled up to the curb. Claire stiffened. "Noah," she called softly, "he's here." Noah bolted to the window, grinning. "That's Dad's new car. Look at it." "I see it, sweetheart." Mark didn't get out. He just leaned across the passenger seat and pushed the door open. Claire walked Noah down the steps. Mark barely looked at her, his sunglasses covering his eyes, his hand casually drumming the wheel. "Hi, Dad." Noah beamed as he climbed in. "Hey, buddy," Mark replied. "We've got a fun day ahead." Claire leaned down and kissed Noah's cheek. "Be good, okay?" "I will." She stepped back and the car pulled away. No goodbye for Mark. Just the fading sound of tires on asphalt. Claire stood there long after the car disappeared, and something inside her whispered that this wasn't going to be a simple weekend visit. Mark's new house was in North Buckhead, one of Atlanta's wealthiest suburbs, just far enough from Savannah to feel like another planet. Noah gawked as they pulled into the driveway. The house was enormous, framed by tall oak trees and an elegant fountain in the center of a circular drive. Floor-to-ceiling windows glinted in the sun. "Whoa," he whispered. "This is where you live now." Mark grinned. "Pretty sweet, huh?" Tessa designed everything herself. Inside, it looked like a showroom. White marble floors, designer furniture, a chandelier over the spiral staircase. It smelled like lavender and leather and money. But nowhere was there a sign that a child had ever stepped foot in the house. No toys, no photos, no traces of Noah at all. "Where's Tessa?" Noah asked after a while, settling into the living room. "She's out having brunch with her girlfriends," Mark said, checking his phone. "She's got some wedding appointments later." "Oh." Mark glanced at his son, then back at his phone. "I've got some calls to make, okay? Important stuff. You can watch TV or play with your tablet." Noah nodded. "Okay." Mark disappeared into his study and closed the door. Noah sat there alone on the enormous white couch, flipping through Netflix until he got bored. He glanced around at the silent house, and then on the coffee table saw a different tablet, sleek, newer than his. Probably Tessa's. Curious, he picked it up. The screen was unlocked. He tapped through a few icons, games, Pinterest, and then the photo app. Hundreds of images. Selfies. Fancy food. Mirror shots in designer outfits. Tessa laughing with friends at rooftop bars. And then Noah stopped. One photo stood out. Tessa kissing a man who wasn't his dad. They were standing on a balcony, the city lights behind them, her arms wrapped around his neck, their faces so close. The timestamp said it was taken yesterday. Noah stared. He remembered something from a show he'd seen with his mom. The word they used. Affair. Was that what this was? He didn't fully understand, but he knew it felt wrong. Important. So he did what he'd seen Claire do many times before. He took a screenshot. Then, just in case, he hid it inside the folder of his game app and locked the screen. When Mark returned an hour later, Noah was back on the couch pretending to play, but his mind was elsewhere. "Have fun?" Mark asked, ruffling his hair without really looking. "Yeah," Noah said, his voice small, but deep inside he was holding a secret, one he didn't quite understand but couldn't let go of. The sound of the front door unlocking made Claire glance up from the couch. She had tried to distract herself all afternoon, vacuuming, sorting laundry, organizing a drawer that hadn't needed organizing in 5 years, but nothing worked. When she opened the door, Noah stepped in first, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders. "Hi, Mom," he said cheerfully, slipping off his shoes. "Hey, sweetheart. Did you have fun?" Noah shrugged. "Kinda. Dad was working a lot, but the house is really big." Claire nodded, reaching out to fix the collar of his jacket. "I'm glad you saw where he lives now." Behind him, Mark appeared at the doorframe, his sunglasses still on. He gave a quick wave without meeting her eyes. "All right, I'll text you later." "Thanks," Claire said flatly. He left as quickly as he'd arrived. After dinner, boxed pasta and garlic bread that neither of them really touched, Noah disappeared into his room for a few minutes. When he returned, he was holding his tablet close to his chest. "Mom," he said, "I found something weird today." Claire set down her wine glass slowly. "What do you mean?" "On Miss Tessa's tablet. She let me use it, and I saw this photo. I saved it to show you." Claire's breath caught. "A photo?" Noah unlocked the screen and navigated through a few taps. Then he handed it over. Claire took it with steady hands. And then the world shifted. It was Tessa, dressed in black, her hair styled like always, effortlessly perfect. And she was kissing someone, a man Claire didn't recognize. The kind of kiss that left no room for doubt, no room for misunderstanding. The timestamp read yesterday. Claire stared at it for several seconds, the tablet growing heavier in her hands. She didn't say a word. Do you think it's a mistake? Noah asked innocently, like maybe it was for a movie or something. Claire forced a small smile and handed the tablet back. It's definitely strange. But you know, sweetheart, it's not really polite to look at people's private photos, especially when you're visiting their home. Noah's shoulders drooped. I didn't mean to. I just got curious. I know. You didn't do anything wrong, Claire said gently. It's bedtime, okay? Go brush your teeth. He nodded, quietly padding off to the bathroom. When he was gone, Claire exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. She stared at the wall. The image burned behind her eyelids. Tessa, the woman who had smiled her way into Claire's life like a polished storm. The woman who had taken everything. Her husband, her security, her family. Now, she was doing the same thing to Mark. Claire should have felt something. Triumph, vindication, revenge. But what she felt instead was stillness. She poured herself another glass of wine and sat on the edge of the couch, legs crossed at the ankle. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just sat and thought. Mark had chosen Tessa over his family. He had burned their marriage down with no apology, no remorse. And now, fate was delivering its own reply. The photo was more than proof. It was prophecy, a mirror held up to Mark's choices, a warning shot wrapped in pixels. But should she act on it? Claire held the stem of her glass, swirling the red liquid slowly. She could send it to him, confront him, or she could show up to the wedding and let him figure it out in front of everyone. Part of her wanted to. And yet, Noah. This was still about Noah. His heart, his peace, his future. Claire closed her eyes. Sometimes revenge wasn't about destruction. Sometimes it was just about truth, finally revealed. The morning of the wedding arrived, wrapped in a strange silence. Claire stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the thin, silver chain around her neck. Her cyan blue dress draped softly over her frame. Simple, elegant, the kind of dress that said, I'm not here to compete. I'm here because I said I would. In the living room, Noah spun slowly in his new navy blue suit, checking his reflection in the window. Do I look like a best man? He asked with a grin. Claire smiled faintly. You look even better. He reached into his small backpack and pulled out a velvet jewelry box, an old one Claire recognized from the back of her dresser, now tied with a gold ribbon. What's that? She asked. A surprise, Noah said, hugging it close. It's a present for Dad, but I'm not telling you what it is. You'll see when he opens it. Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. She wanted to ask him, Are you sure? Do you understand what you're carrying? But she didn't. Instead, she nodded. All right, let's get going. The lobby of the Astoria Grand buzzed with noise, perfume, and quiet judgment. Claire stepped into the sea of expensive gowns, polished shoes, and champagne flutes held with effortless grace. The whispers started almost immediately. Is that her? The ex-wife. She came? How awkward! Claire heard it all. Every syllable. But she didn't flinch. She walked with her back straight, holding Noah's hand, her heels clicking against the marble like punctuation marks. One foot after another, steady. The ceremony hall was a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, gold trim, white roses blooming from every surface. At the front, an arch of hydrangeas and orchids framed the aisle like a coronation path. An usher escorted them to a table at the far back. Guess we're the B-list, Claire whispered under her breath. Noah bounced in his seat. Mom, look, that's Aunt Tessa. Claire looked. Tessa emerged from a side room in a cloud of chiffon and diamonds. Her dress clung perfectly, her hair an elegant updo, her every move choreographed like a bridal ad. She looked radiant, untouchable, but Claire saw the cracks, the stiffness in her smile, the way her eyes flicked toward the crowd, not out of joy, but calculation. And somewhere inside that crowd stood Mark, tall and polished in his tuxedo, shaking hands, accepting congratulations as if this were his coronation. Claire felt no heat, no bitterness, just stillness. The ceremony began. Claire barely heard the vows, the clinking of crystal, the words eternity and soulmate blurred together. Noah leaned toward her and whispered, "Dad looks cool, huh?" She looked at her son and nodded. "He does." Then came the reception. Long tables, champagne, speeches. Claire kept her gaze low, her voice polite, until the MC tapped his mic, and now a few words from the groom. Mark Bennett. The applause rang out as Mark took the microphone. He swayed slightly, tipsy, confident. "I just want to thank you all for being here," he began, "for celebrating this amazing day with us. Tessa, you've changed my life." The crowd clapped. "But also," he added, smiling wider, "life teaches you things. Sometimes you have to go through a mistake to find the right path." Claire's fingers curled under the tablecloth. Mark scanned the crowd slowly. "I thought I knew what love was once. I didn't, but now I do." The guests murmured, some laughing politely, others glancing at Claire. She didn't move, but Noah stood up. Claire caught it too late. He walked up to the front, small steps across a room of silence. Mark looked startled. "Noah? What is it, buddy?" Noah held out the velvet box. "I have a gift for you, Dad. A special one." Claire rose slowly from her chair, and the room held its breath. Noah stood under the spotlight of the grand chandelier, holding the velvet box with both hands like it was sacred. His small voice echoed across the hall. "It's a present," he said, "for your wedding." Mark smiled awkwardly and took the box, chuckling nervously. "Thanks, champ." The crowd clapped, some indulgently, others politely uncomfortable. Claire felt a cold tightness spread from her throat to her spine. Mark untied the ribbon, lifted the lid, and the clapping stopped. Completely. Mark's fingers froze midair. He reached in slowly, pulled out the single photo inside and stared. It took only a second, but the color drained from his face like wine spilled across white linen. The image was unmistakable. Tessa, in a black silk dress, arms wrapped around a man who wasn't him, lips pressed to his like a promise, and the timestamp, clear and damning, just one day before. Claire didn't breathe. Mark's lips moved, but no sound came. He turned the photo over as if hoping for an explanation to be printed on the back, but there was only silence. He looked up, eyes locked on Tessa across the room. She stood frozen near the head table, still in her gown, a glass of champagne halfway to her mouth. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Mark stepped forward and held up the photo. "What is this?" he asked, barely louder than a whisper. Tessa didn't move. Mark's voice rose, louder now, a tremble cracking through his confidence. "What is this, Tessa?" Claire stood slowly from her table, but didn't move forward. She didn't need to. She was no longer part of this. Tessa's hand trembled. Her glass clinked slightly as she set it down. "Mark, I can explain. To who?" Mark shouted, his voice ricocheting through the hall. "To me? To them." He turned in a full circle, holding the photo high. "Everyone, this is what I got for finally moving on. For building a new life." Gasps, whispers, chairs shifting. A woman in the front row clutched her pearls. Tessa stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor like guilt personified. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, really?" Mark's voice cracked. "Because it looks like you've been doing to me exactly what I did to Claire." Claire's chest tightened. There it was. The truth. Loud, public, and not spoken by her. Noah looked around, confused. Did I do something wrong? Claire moved toward him, kneeling beside him on the floor. No, baby, she whispered, holding his hand. You just told the truth. Mark looked down at them, pointing. This was you, wasn't it? You planned this. Claire stood, and for the first time, met his eyes directly. No, she said calmly. I didn't plan anything. That photo. Noah found it. On Tessa's tablet. He thought it was strange, and he wanted to give you a gift. The silence in the room was deafening. Mark's jaw clenched. His voice dropped to a bitter rasp. A kid wouldn't do that on his own. Claire's gaze didn't waver. You invited us. You handed him the tablet. You created this moment all by yourself. One of Tessa's cousins stood and grabbed her purse. Another followed. Then a third. The room cracked. Guests began murmuring, some rising from their chairs, others watching like they couldn't look away from a train crash in slow motion. Mark turned to Tessa, still holding the photo like evidence in a trial. Who is he? How long? Tessa's mouth opened, closed, opened again, but nothing came out. Claire took Noah's hand. Come on, sweetheart. Wait, Mark said, moving after them, almost stumbling. Claire, please! She turned briefly, not out of pity. Just clarity. This was never about me, she said. You tried to humiliate us. Instead, the truth humiliated you. She didn't say another word. Didn't need to. She walked Noah down the aisle of white rose petals, past the whispers, past the frozen bride, past the man who once left her for something shinier, only to be shattered by the very light he chased. And when the doors closed behind them, Claire exhaled slowly, not in victory, in freedom. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. Noah had fallen asleep almost as soon as they returned, his little body curled up under the covers, arms wrapped around his stuffed bear. Claire had tucked him in gently, brushed the hair from his forehead, and kissed him once, soft, long, the way only mothers do when they're grateful something ended without breaking their child. Now, hours later, she sat alone in the living room, a half-full glass of wine in one hand, the dim light of the floor lamp casting long shadows across the floor. She didn't know what she expected to feel. Not victory, not regret, just breath. She stared out the window. The city hummed faintly in the distance, muffled by old glass and thick curtains. In that moment, Claire felt suspended between two versions of herself, the woman who had begged Mark not to leave, and the one who had walked out of that wedding hall without ever raising her voice. The wine tasted metallic now. She swirled it once, set it down, and then her phone lit up. Mark. She stared at the name, letting it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then she picked up. Claire, came his voice, rough, uncertain, maybe drunk. She didn't answer. He exhaled. I had to say something. She waited. You were right, he said finally. It wasn't Noah's fault. I know that. He didn't mean to, and I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Claire leaned back on the couch, the phone pressed against her cheek like a fading ember. I didn't know about that photo until today, she said quietly. I didn't even see it until he showed it to me. Mark sighed. God, I should have known. Tessa, I had no idea. None. Claire closed her eyes. I guess it hurts when you think you've started over clean, and then it turns out the dirt just changed shape. There was silence, longer than she expected. Finally, he said, I ruined it. The wedding. Everything. She picked up her wine again. That's not my concern anymore, Mark. I know. But still, I keep thinking, if you knew about the photo, why didn't you just tell me? Call me before the wedding. Save me the embarrassment. Claire blinked. Her voice stayed even. You didn't think about saving me from embarrassment when you brought your girlfriend into our life, into Noah's life, and called us mistakes in front of 200 people. Silence. More silence. She could hear him breathing. Shaky. Hollow. You're right, he whispered. I feel like everything's unraveling. Claire looked at the ceiling for a long moment. You know what the worst part is, Mark? I don't feel anything about that anymore. Not anger. Not pity. Just distance. Like I watched it happen from a window I shut a long time ago. He didn't reply, and that was okay. She'd said what needed saying. Good night, Mark, she said softly. Take care of yourself. She ended the call before he could speak again. The next morning, the world went on. Claire brewed her coffee, packed Noah's lunch, and folded laundry. Normal things. Beautiful, small, normal things. The weight she had carried for so long, the heaviness in her chest, in her stomach, behind her eyes, it was still there, but it no longer owned her. It had become part of the background noise. Not a scream, just a hum. And somewhere inside, something had settled. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just peace. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Claire's new apartment, spilling across the hardwood floors like a promise. The space was bigger now, brighter. 2 bedrooms instead of 1. A small office nook tucked beside the balcony. And best of all, just 5 minutes from Noah's school. Claire stood barefoot in the kitchen, sipping coffee from her favorite chipped mug. The moving boxes were mostly unpacked, books lined neatly on the shelves, a framed photo of her and Noah on their weekend hike now sat proudly on the counter. Mom, where should I put this? Noah called from the living room, holding a stack of board games. Next to the bookshelf, sweetheart, she answered, turning off the kettle. He nodded and went about organizing them carefully, humming to himself. Claire smiled, not the kind of smile people give to hide pain. The real kind. Quiet. Earned. 6 months had passed since the wedding, and everything had changed. It hadn't been dramatic. No grand moment. Just small shifts, like pieces of her life clicking back into place. She had received her promotion at Lakeside Financial in early spring, senior tax analyst. The title meant more work, yes, but it also meant recognition, stability, respect. And with it came the confidence to finally do something she'd been dreaming of for years, opening her own small tax consulting firm. It was modest, still part-time, but already picking up clients. Mostly single mothers, small business owners, retirees confused about paperwork, people like her. People who just needed someone to help them breathe. Claire had become that person. Mark hadn't tried to call again. Not once. He paid child support on time now, picked Noah up for his visits, attended his baseball games, sometimes cheered too loudly from the bleachers. But that was it. No more late-night apologies. No more asking to talk. No more pretending they could rewind the clock. And Claire had no desire to respond anyway. She had stopped waiting for closure the day she realized she didn't need it. Because closure wasn't about a door slamming shut. It was about walking away and not needing to look back. That afternoon, as she was arranging files for a new client, the intercom buzzed. Noah peeked around the corner, eyes wide. Mom, Dad's here to pick me up. Claire set down the folder and walked to the door. Mark stood in the hallway, dressed casually, holding a baseball glove in one hand and a Gatorade in the other. Hey, he said, awkward. Ready for the big game? Noah rushed past, grabbing his cap from the coat hook. Let's go. Mark gave a small nod to Claire. Everything going okay? She smiled politely. Everything's great. Good. That's good. And just like that, they were gone. No drama. No ghosts. Just a man doing the bare minimum, and a woman who no longer needed anything from him. Claire closed the door and returned to her desk. Outside, the sky had turned soft with clouds. The breeze slipped in through the balcony screen, carrying the scent of something blooming. She picked up her coffee and leaned against the doorframe, looking out over the neighborhood. Children riding bikes, neighbors trimming hedges, birdsong in the trees. It wasn't the life she thought she'd have. It was better, because it was hers, built not on illusion, but on truth, sustained not by revenge, but by peace. And somewhere deep in her bones, Claire knew she had won, not by ruining his life, but by reclaiming her own. She sipped her coffee, eyes soft, face calm. The past hadn't disappeared, but it no longer held the power to define her. Not anymore. She exhaled deeply, looked up at the sky, and whispered, not in bitterness, not in triumph, just softly, "Thank you for the lesson.